how do you evaluate performance? Realistically evaluate performance? Because that's such a big piece when it comes to terminations. And I was amazed at how uncomfortable some executive level folks were when it came to evaluating performance.
Welcome to The Lift, the show about leadership, growth, and getting what we want. I'm your host, Ben Brooks. For over a decade, I've worked with CEOs, their executive teams, HR departments, and entrepreneurs to identify what drives their success and what holds them back. And now I'm excited to share those insights with you. On The Lift, we pull up to see the bigger picture from accomplished leaders who know how to get things done in a rapidly changing world. We've got all of that and a lot more coming up next on The Lift. Today, we're talking about something that can feel pretty heavy for most leaders: firing people. This topic is something that is not covered nearly enough in the leadership space, and so we're turning this into a two-part series. Today, we're focused on everything upstream from having to let someone go. And we're asking the question, how can leaders prevent the conditions that make terminations messy or even painful? Because most terminations aren't about one moment or decision. They come from what leaders do, and more often avoid doing, over time. So what does strong management look like here? Well, our guest, Dr. Dennis Davis, is going to help us figure that out today. He's a clinical psychologist and a national expert in conflict resolution. He helps organizations build the habits that make performance clear and decisions cleaner. He works actually for a law firm, so he understands both the interpersonal as well as the legal aspects of employee separations and terminations. We'll go deeper into the legal side of things in part 2. This is the perfect episode to kick off our series because so much of what goes wrong in terminations, or why people even resist letting people go, starts way earlier than the conversation itself. So let's get into it. Dennis Davis, welcome to The Lift.
Thank you, Ben. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, I'd done some research, and I think you said when you were 12 years old, you knew you wanted to be a quote-unquote shrink.
Yes. I'm in the 7th grade, and all the guys are talking about what they did over the weekend and the fantastic time they had over the weekend. I'm like, all I did was hang out with my parents over the weekend. What's wrong with me? So believe it or not, I started going to the library and reading books on human behavior. Now, in full transparency, most of it was over my head at 12. I could pick up every 5th or 6th word. But as the years went by, I could pick up more and more and more. And I really wanted to understand human behavior.
Did you find one of those magical librarians that often exist and that help people open up their world through books that would help you find this? Or was this self-serve through the Dewey Decimal?
It was Dewey. Now, you're too young to remember Dewey Decimal. Come on. But I do remember that.
Dennis, my skincare routine is on point, and I got a Zoom filter on here. So, you don't know me.
I got you.
But thank you.
I got you.
Okay.
Well, yes, it was through the Dewey Decimal system. And I would just kind of walk up and down the aisles and just gravitate towards something that seemed like it might explain how people behave. And that's what really drew me in, no kidding. Even when I was about to go to college and I declared that I was going to be a psychology major, the feedback was, well, why don't you hold it off? You're pretty good in math. You're pretty good in science. Mm-hmm. You don't have to declare a major right away. Nope, I want to be a psychology major.
And when you were a young person, did you have people around you that you were seeking to understand?
Well, absolutely. The fact of the matter is, my family, like all families, I imagine, we had people who I now look back on and recognize they were dealing with depression, and they were dealing with bipolar disorder. Of course, in those days, it was called manic depression. And so I wasn't able to put a label on it in those days, but I knew that there was something going on that we had to understand.
I'm also curious, your first job ever, where you got paid for time or for effort?
My first job, I was 14 years old. And I was the dining room cleanup boy at a Hardee's.
Oh, Hardee's. Okay.
Yes, it was a burger joint. And back in the day, you couldn't get a work permit until you were 16. But they hired me. I couldn't go in the kitchen, but I could sweep and do the bathrooms in the dining room. And that's what I did, 14 years old.
What did you learn from that job?
I learned there's a certain amount of confidence that comes with earning a paycheck. It made me feel like, you know what? I can make some decisions now. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Have you ever been a participant in a termination where you've been let go from a job?
We came to a mutual decision that it wasn't working out. So I would say yes. It's
Okay.
one of those mutual decisions, but it was going to happen. Yes, yes.
And I'm curious, what did you learn from that?
What I learned from that was it's okay to speak up and to be yourself and to set boundaries. I don't believe that the conversation I was having was initially designed to be a termination discussion. But I think we were having a discussion and I had set some limits in my head. I will not go here. I will not do that.
Sure.
I will not go beyond this. That's when it became a termination discussion. And I felt empowered, believe it or not.
Yeah, I think, when you sort of understand where your line is and what you're willing to do or not willing to do, and then it helps you be more self and situationally aware of, is this a fit?
That's right.
But it sounds like this was a healthy understanding for you that you were in the wrong context.
And you said something, Ben, that really, really just resonated with me. You said, is this a fit? Now, here's the interesting thing. For me, it's interesting. Initially, it was very much a fit, but I think I had outgrown the position. And I think we both came to recognize that. And it wasn't humiliating. It wasn't a yelling, screaming match. It doesn't fit anymore.
Part of the reason, Dennis, that I wanted to have you on the show was I have been an entrepreneur for 12 years now. I was a senior vice president in HR at a big global company that even owned an HR consulting firm. And I have a private practice with CEOs and executives. I don't know if I talk about anything more than letting people go.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, letting someone go, while it can be an important step to do, sometimes it signals an upstream breakdown or failure mode. But it's one of these things that I find is so fraught. When I first joined the HR profession, I went to a Human Capital Institute training course, and they said, you should hire slow and fire fast. Instead, most organizations have shotgun weddings as hiring processes, and they stay in dysfunctional relationships for way too long until it gets really bad. Do you think organizations are, in general, letting people go enough, not enough, just right, in terms of this kind of cycle?
I think organizations are not letting people go enough and not letting people go early enough. What I find is both the individual and the organization on some level recognize this isn't working. We've outgrown each other. The needs of the organization and the individual's needs have changed and evolved to a place where this isn't working, but we're all in denial. We don't acknowledge it. We don't talk about it. We just move forward.
What do you think the restraining forces are that have people not confront that?
I think oftentimes it's ego involved, and not just ego on the part of the employee, but ego on the part of the organization, the hiring individual. Because on some level, what that means is maybe this wasn't a good fit in the first place. And so I've got a vested interest in not acknowledging that maybe I made a bad hire. And I think that happens a lot, that there's some ego investment in keeping a person on board longer than the relationship would warrant. And I think there's fear on the part of the individual. What do I do next? I've recognized that this relationship, we've outgrown this relationship, but what do I do now? What do I do next? That's a big one.
When I talk to executives, I talked to someone last week who's a C-suite at a publicly traded company, and they didn't want to let someone go because they were afraid they couldn't backfill the headcount.
Yes.
They said, well, it's better than not having anyone. And I said, well, how well are they doing their job on a 0 to 100%? They're saying probably 35.
Yeah.
But they were like, well, that's better than 0.
Yeah.
And even though that's a publicly traded company and they have a high degree of incentive with the stock and things, the internal controls around finance or headcount can be a restraining force, I often find.
Here's the other thing, Ben. In addition to getting only 35 cents on the dollar, and that person thinking, well, 35% is better than 0, think about the fact that when we have someone in that position, others in the organization don't see that as an open position. So they don't strive toward it. They don't show you what they can do. And so you're losing out on many other people's potential by keeping someone in a position that doesn't fit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the second level order consequence of opportunity and striving and
The step up.
competitive internal labor market or external.
That's right.
Because you don't have a circulation there. You're blocking that platform for talent.
That's right. The perception is that there's no step up potential internally or externally. And so you're leaving a lot of potential on the table because you have this person giving you 35%.
You know, a lot of managers and executives I speak to will blame HR and legal. They say, well, I can't let them go. They'll just say, legal won't let me, HR won't let me. First of all, well, where is the authority, right?
Yes.
Are they allowed to veto it, or is it more about how you do it, not if you do it? They're asking, can I do it? Versus really saying, this is my head count, my budget, and I'm accountable for outcomes of my team, and this isn't working. How can I do this?
So this isn't working. I want this person gone. There's no documentation. And just last month or last quarter, you gave this person a significant raise and you said that they walk on water. And so what that speaks to is being real and transparent with people all along. And the fact of the matter is, when it isn't working, sometimes we just don't have the moxie to say, this isn't working, and here are the reasons why it's not working. Instead, we give that person a raise. We say that they walk on water and they glow. And now HR and or legal will say, nope, you can't now say they have to go. So I think that's a really big piece. I just did with a client, all of their senior leaders and the next level down as well, went through some training where we talked about how do you evaluate performance, realistically evaluate performance, because that's such a big piece when it comes to terminations. And I was amazed at how uncomfortable some executive level folks were when it came to evaluating performance.
I can even relate because as a coach, I want to develop and encourage, I'm the, if you're 35, let's get it to 40 and let's get it to 45 and let's get it to 60. But I think that developmental thing and not confusing that with performance, it's taken me a while to be able to say to someone that I employ at a company that I own, this is below my expectations.
Yes.
But that for me took some growth to be that explicit, which is, I'm not saying you're a piece of crap, I don't want you here, your job is on the line.
That's right.
I'm just saying this is off from what I want from you.
And you know what I've seen, Ben? Very often when that discussion is initiated, the employee is kind of like, whew. Because on some level, they were aware that they were not performing up to standard.
Sure.
But we all just kind of looked away in denial and didn't address it. And so there's a certain sense of relief, right? And so very often I'll ask this question. 1, can you do this? If the answer is yes, the next question is, do you want to do this? And sometimes I'll get, because they kind of came to a realization that they didn't want to do it, but they had never had that conversation. And it's a scary conversation to have.
The skill will matrix we used in consulting of x-axis skill, low skill, high skill, and then the will being your hunger, your openness, your drive, and low to high. And if you've got someone that says, hey, I can't do this, low skill, and I don't want to do this, low will, it's like helping somebody get sober. You can't help them unless they want to be.
100% agree.
I think conflict is definitely some restraining force here, which sort of almost poetically results often in big blow up conflicts because the small conflicts were avoided upstream.
Yes.
Is that what you see sometimes?
Absolutely. But here's the thing. Most of us have been socialized and trained to believe that conflict is bad. The conflict is evil. And so that's why we push it down and we deny it. But the fact of the matter is sometimes simply informing people that conflict is most often the result of conflicting needs and wants and desires and motivations and pressures. And the way I like to explain it to people is when you think about conflict, think about product development department versus a sales department. The sales folks, they just want to get things to market. Their income is tied to it. The product development people, they want to test it and they want to make sure that, and so there's conflict built into those different departments. And that's not bad. That's not wrong. So helping people understand the role of conflict is a really important thing in helping them not push it down until it becomes explosive.
Yeah, we had an expert on conflict on the show who has a book coming out, Amy Gallo, and her view is absolutely way too little conflict happening in organizations. And there's a lot of avoidance and just sort of surviving some of these interactions. Because I do think one of the core competencies for people to keep a job in larger organizations is to be liked and to get along.
So many years ago, I was having a conversation with an individual in an organization, and the person was about 2 levels above me in the organization. But we kind of knew each other socially outside the organization. And I can remember giving him some really harsh feedback, not in a harsh way, but stuff that's hard to hear. And he looked at me like I had 3 ears, and he said, no one's ever said that to me before. And I go, that's because everybody wants you to like them. I know that you
Mm.
already like me, so I don't have that pressure. And he was stunned. So it's amazing. You're right.
As we've gotten into more development conversations, Pilot, our company, offers solutions around developmental feedback and things. And we are shocked at even at the most senior levels, how little feedback people have been given. Or if they're given feedback, it's in feedback theater, we call it, where it's just some innocuous term they don't understand, or it's some tiny little thing, or there's, et cetera. And when we say, you talk way too much, you dominate.
Yes.
You need to think before you say. And they're like, holy cow. And then sometimes they say, well, my wife says that, or my husband says that. But then it's like, well, but do you understand you're upset that some of your team doesn't speak up? It's because you run your damn mouth. And so when you have those conversations, there often is that sigh of like, well, someone noticed it, or thank God someone's telling me what's going on.
Yes. It's funny you mentioned the spouse, the partner thing, right? One of the things I'll say to people is that if you get a piece of feedback and you get it one time in one area of your life, okay. But do you hear similar feedback from this area, this area, this area? Because if you do, that means it's you and not the individuals giving you the feedback. So that's piece number one. But piece number two that you mentioned, the feedback also has to be actionable. Tell me about something that is not meeting standards, and then give me some idea of what I can do to fix it, what the action is that I can take. And that's a piece that's often missing as well in terms of feedback.
We work upstream from that even. It's often organizations have not codified well what's expected,
That's
in
right.
particular outside of quantitative outcomes. In many organizations don't even have that. But in terms of an agreement on how we're going to work together and how we're going to get things done, that's not explicit often.
That's right.
And so I think there's not often that shared language, which can lower the heat and depersonalize some of the feedback.
Sometimes, you know what I tell leaders? I go, as opposed to you setting expectations and telling that subordinate, this is what you expect from them. Have you ever asked them, what is it that you expect to contribute? And how do you expect to contribute that, right? Helping that individual design and implement the action steps themselves. And that's something a lot of leaders kind of go, I hadn't thought about that. But yes, having me describe for you what it is that I plan to do and how I plan in accordance with our prior agreement, obviously. But these are the steps that I plan to take, and this is what I plan to accomplish. That's a really, really important thing, because now I am owning it. And that's what's often missing, the ownership of the fix.
The closest thing I think, and this you tell me as the shrink here, I think it mirrors some mommy daddy stuff. It's a paternalistic dynamic, and it's the only person in your life that really has that much authority, because they have your allowance.
That's right.
And so I think we do fall in these things where the parents can overfunction, in this case being the managers.
Yes.
And they hold small the employee, and then they underfunction and are waiting to be kind of chewing up the worm from mama bird and spitting it in baby bird's mouth. That isn't going to work. Mr. Shrink, what do you think of that, doctor?
You're right on. That familial relationship, it is so important. Let's be real. There are many analogies between the parent-child relationship and the leader-subordinate relationship. I mean, there just are. But what's supposed to happen developmentally in a parent-child relationship? Well, as the child matures and develops, the relationship is supposed to evolve as well. And that's what's supposed to happen in the workplace as well, where we get to a place where we can have adult relationships. Remember, I talked to you about that time that we mutually decided that I was going to move on. What happened was, I wanted to have an adult relationship with the parent, right? And the parent still wanted to be in charge and be controlling, and I had outgrown that. Those dynamics are supposed to evolve over time, and sometimes they're stuck. Both parties have a role to play in evolving the relationship to an adult-to-adult relationship. Understanding that the leader has the final authority in most cases, but still, this is an adult-to-adult relationship, which is why it's so important to ask that employee, okay, so what is it that you see your contribution to the organization as? And how are you going to accomplish that? Again, that's me taking ownership of it, and that's me also having an adult-to-adult relationship as opposed to a parent-child relationship.
We had talked earlier on about organizations don't let people go enough and soon enough. Would you also agree that they don't do it thoughtfully or humanely enough on average?
Yeah. I agree with that 100%.
So how do you kind of get a sense of, what is enough and what's getting in the way of them doing that enough?
So when I think about things can be too hard, things can be too soft, and things can be just right. So what's just right? Well, when the two parties recognize, you know what, I am not meeting standard, and there is not any foreseeable opportunity for me to meet the standard. And sometimes that's a month, sometimes that's a quarter, sometimes that's 6 months. I don't know that there's a codified standard that we can put on it. Mm-hmm. I think frank discussions, these are the requirements of the role. We have both agreed on that. All right. You're meeting right now, Dennis, you're doing 35% of the role. All right. Let's talk about what's going on with the other 65%. Maybe it's leadership hasn't given enough authority for me to complete my role. Yep. And so let's talk about why that 65% is not being done. So I think that discussion has to be had before we can put some limit on it.
This idea of soon enough, I often notice managers and executives, they don't ever have a timeline.
Yes.
And they always want to give them a shot. They want to be fair. Well, I want to give them a shot. Now, mind you, they haven't given them great feedback, so they can't use that time well. And I also noticed, I had an executive I called out on this who's someone I deeply respect, but they were, C-suite, and they were going to hire a new SVP of a whole department. And there were VPs in there that absolutely this executive knew needed to go. And they said, well, I'm going to hire this new person, and then they're going to assess them, and then they can decide what their team is going to look like. And I said, well, aren't you just handing them a bag of crap as a new outside employee? Mm-hmm. Did they come in as the Grim Reaper and Bonobos or, Chanel or St. John's suit or whatever they're wearing? And then they come in and they're going to make a call in 30 days? No. And they're going to want to be fair and get to know them and do a listening tour. And you're just punting that at least 6 months down. And then they have to carry the residue of cleaning up your management debt.
Yes. Yes.
That's an impediment to their success. What if you took care of this in advance?
That's right.
So, that's the part I've also seen is just this desire to kind of hand this crap of dealing with it to someone else or to postpone or to punt.
The myth of niceness. So I've got this senior VP who is in a role that's way beyond their capacity. We've established that this is not something they're capable of. But being nice means I allow them to be in that position. No, being nice means we have a frank discussion. I lay the options out. The options are we can step down your role, step back your role. We can allow you to explore options outside of our organization. But giving honest to goodness feedback is actually being nice, not faking it like things are going well. And so many of us have been conditioned to believe that being nice means not having a hard conversation or giving difficult feedback. That's not being nice. That's being fake.
When you say not soon enough, what do you think people's kind of default timing is and sort of knowledge work around that? You give them a year, you give them 2 years, and what would maybe sooner look like?
I generally, or when I've talked to people, the feedback I've gotten has not been that they had in their head a period of time, but rather when it becomes unbearable, when others start to notice, when our bottom line is impacted. So there are events, in my experience, there are events that people set in their heads as opposed to timelines. And what I say to them is, once you reach those events, our bottom line has been impacted, our profits are down, our sales are down, whatever it is, it's too late. You've gone way beyond. I think people ought to set events. Okay, during this quarter, we need to see this percentage of a gain. Set very, very specific demarcations of pass and not pass. And then have the discussion about whether or not this is doable. Do you see that as feasible? Do you see that as doable? And that's a difficult conversation to have. Because what if the person says no?
And I think it creates a disincentive for them to be honest, because they're like, well, does that mean you're going to fire me or I lose my job immediately or I don't have health benefits for my kid? And that conversation around, how soon, I do think being precise with some gates, which doesn't mean you're unreasonable and say, oh, well, in 60 days, there's going to be a complete transformation. But, what would meaningful progress be that would give me confidence that we're on the path? But knowing, I'm just thinking, maybe this is a little bit manipulative. So tell me, you check me on this. But if that sort of others noticing is a propelling force for managers, Is there a way that executives over managers can sort of precipitate that before it's a breakdown, kind of give them that check engine light that you can kind of accelerate? Otherwise, they're going to wait till it's terrible.
Well, let's talk about performance improvement plans.
Okay. And for people who are not familiar listening to this, Dennis, what is a PIP?
A performance improvement plan, a PIP, is where we have an official agreement with an employee that by this time, we're going to see this much progress. And if we don't see this much progress within this time frame, it means that your tenure here will not last. That's the basics of a performance improvement plan.
I have found in my career a very low success rate of PIPs.
Yeah.
If you're to say, what's the batting average of a PIP as an instrument? Now, I'm not saying everyone does them well. I have found it's often single-digit percentage, and it winds up being this sort of humiliation walk. But at the same time, I also see the merit in them and the fairness, because if there's an issue and you haven't given people deserve some time to work on it. How do you see when they work, and how do you see when they don't work?
I see exactly what you just described when they don't work, where it wasn't a genuine attempt to improve performance in the first place. It was let's check the box, because legal and or HR is going to ask us if we did that or require that we do this. So let's set up the performance improvement plan. Let's set up the PIP. And then in 60 days, in 90 days, in whatever the time frame is, when you haven't completed this successfully, then we can exit you and we will have checked all the boxes. And that's so inappropriate, in my opinion. I agree with you that the usage rate has been high, but the success rate has been very, very low. But I think we can switch that. I think if people really understand, again, you have to have that conversation with that employee early on. These are the expectations that we agreed on. These are the job requirements that we agreed on. Yes. Yes. All right. And this is what I'm seeing. Yes. Yes. And this is where we need to go from here. Yes. Yes. All right. Let's set that up and make that happen. And really making it a genuine attempt to improve performance. I've seen it work in those situations. I really have.
Sure.
But as you have noted, that's not the most common usage of the PIP, and that's unfortunate.
A PIP is often Latin for we need to have paperwork to get legal or HR to approve firing someone, we need to have paperwork to use in a trial if we get sued.
That's right.
And that doesn't improve the performance. That just is a risk reduction plan.
That's exactly right.
Not a performance improvement. There's a lack of integrity. It's not genuine. If you're an employee listening to this and legal is involved, it is likely a risk reduction plan, not a performance improvement plan.
If employees are listening, I think it's important to state then and there at the outset of or a proposed PIP, you know what? I don't know that I can complete this in this period of time. So the employee can negotiate that as well. But you're right. The way management and leadership tends to use that makes it a setup for failure right from the start very often.
And, when we think about that third part of how we let people go, humanely or thoughtfully with dignity, I've just seen some pretty bad hygiene, in particular, as we got into hybrid and remote work, the mass Zoom firings, people going into an office and their badge doesn't work, crap that I couldn't have imagined 10 years ago, doing, layoffs that are kind of not that necessary, and doing them on the 15th of December. We used to have a sacred period from Thanksgiving to New Year's. You didn't cut anyone unless they broke the law, because you don't want their holiday and everything else at that stressful time and money. You just move it into the new year.
Let's talk about it. You mentioned a couple of things. Dignity. We can terminate an employee and have them save face. First of all, we don't do it en masse. We don't do it where they're blindsided, where they show up one day and their badge doesn't work. That's just wrong. It's inappropriate, and it isn't saving dignity, saving face. As best as we can, it needs to be one-on-one. And in person is best, but you're right. With the workplace places being where they are now, sometimes it's not going to be in person. Sometimes it's going to be virtual, and that's acceptable. By the time it's gotten to that place, we both should have had a conversation and recognize that this isn't working for you, and is it working for us? One of the things that's important, I hear people talking about soft landings, and what do you think about that? I think we tell people so much, we care about you. And I think it's important to show that. Do we have outplacement services that we can offer to people? I think that's really important. The fit isn't right. But you know what? There is a place for you out there. And so we're going to offer you 60 days, 90 days of outplacement service with our provider that you can utilize to find your next spot. I think these are wonderful ways to show not just lip service of respect, but to show respect, dignity, and caring about our people.
The head of HR that I worked for, we had to lay off a lot of people over time, and she really taught me a lot about how to do that. And a big part of it was, you don't litigate the past. You don't get into the detail of all that we're past that. It's about moving forward, but, giving them choice and not having their survival be at stake. If they think they can do without them now, do it sooner, but use the payroll you're going to spend on them and give them their standard severance plus 4 months.
That's right.
Plus the benefits. And all of a sudden, that's the soft landing. And they get more time to look for a job and they get all these things. Whereas, again, I think nobody realizes that, there's these things can be negotiated.
That's right.
And that they're a major lever.
It should never be a surprise. If my leader, my manager has been handling their business, it's not a surprise for me. It's not working. And the question becomes, okay, how are we going to separate this relationship? How are we going to move in our own directions where you have dignity, you save face, and we don't just lip service that we care about you, we demonstrate that we care about you.
So Dennis, as we're wrapping up this segment, as you think about the executives and managers that are listening to this, and in particular, kind of on the first two of, are we letting go of people enough and soon enough? What sort of practical advice would you have them consider for them to reflect, not just at the organizational level? Because I think people tend to want to say, well, does our organization, does our culture? But, the agent of change is the individual.
Absolutely.
What do they need to reflect or confront, to think about, are we doing enough of this and are we doing it soon enough?
How often am I having conversations with my people? Many organizations have moved away from the annual performance appraisals. Okay, that's fine. Many are still doing them. But am I having regular check-ins with my people? And yeah, that's a lot of work as a leader, but you know what? That's part of the job. Regular check-ins and saying, hey, you know what? Things are going well. I like to see more of this. I like to see less of that. Setting the standards and, getting incremental improvement from your people all along the way. That's a big deal. Even if we're not doing annual performance appraisals, checking in with you and letting you know how I am assessing where we are now is really important. Also, not being shy about saying, all right, good job with X, but this is what I need to see. I need to see Y. Circling back around to make sure that what you expected to see or wanted to see is being seen. I think those are two really big steps toward good leadership.
Good people want to know where they stand.
Yes.
Good people want to be challenged. When I do interviews to hire people or even in exit interviews, I ask often their best manager, and it wasn't the one with the lowest standards.
Back in the day when supermarket tabloids were really, really big, the ones that were the most popular, the ones that gave you little quizzes. How do you compare? How many push-ups can you do? What's going on in your bedroom? People want to compare how they're doing with others. Yes. And it's no different in the workplace.
Well, Dennis, the last thing I'd like to ask before our final segment here, what's sticky from this conversation? What is, something you're going to chew on after this conversation or that you're taking away?
That employee success is far more contingent upon leadership style than we ever like to acknowledge. But assuming that we do a decent job of recruiting and screening and interviewing and hiring, right? My people's success falls on my shoulders a lot more than I like to acknowledge. That's number one. And again, that goes back to the first thing you asked me, which is, why do we take so long to have those difficult conversations and let people go? Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes it's because I recognize that maybe I didn't do enough work up front. And so what I would say is, leaders, let's do a lot more work up front in developing our people. Once we've decided, you know what, you meet the standards, we're going to bring you on board now. Let's talk about how to be successful here.
We're ending today's episode with the heat check, our guest's hottest take on how the way we work and lead will change in the next 5 years. 5 years from now, where do you think we're going to look back in terms of how we let people go? Or is it going to change? What's going to happen with AI relative to terminations? Are things going to get better, worse? Where do you see all this going?
It's interesting you threw the AI piece in there. The first thing you made me think of is, I'll say this. I think because of the increasing violence in our society and therefore the increasing violence in workplaces, I think we're going to be forced to pay more attention to how we manage people in our organizations. We're going to be forced to pay attention to how we do those check-ins and touch base with people and treat them with dignity and respect. More and more states are saying, hey, you know what? This workplace violence thing is a big deal. And so we need to pay attention to it. And I think we're going to be forced to do that. Now, that said, I think more and more organizations are wrestling with trying to use AI for terminations and things like that, which I think is a bad idea. As we're talking about more right brain interactions with people and we're taking the right brain out of it. So I think that's a bad idea. As people become or perceive themselves as being more and more desperate, they take more and more desperate measures. And so I think we're going to have to pay attention to that. We're going to see people doing that, see management leadership doing that. But there's that other side where we're drifting toward less personal interactions. And that's going to be a problem, I believe.
My friend who's an employment attorney said, I've never seen someone sue their company that wasn't disrespected. It's less about what you did and often more about how you did it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Dr. Dennis Davis, thank you for joining The Lift.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, everyone, let's turn today's episode into action. Dennis showed us something most leaders already know, but won't say out loud. Avoiding the hard conversations doesn't protect anyone. It just delays the damage and increases the pain of taking action down the road. Here are 3 things you can do this week. First, schedule a conversation with someone whose performance has been nagging at you. Not a catch-up, but a real conversation where you say, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I need from you. You're not being harsh by telling the truth. You're being a leader. Second, flip the dynamic on expectations. Instead of telling your direct report exactly what they should do to address the performance gaps, ask them what's your contribution to the situation here, and how are you going to change that? That kind of ownership of them creating their own plan is often what's missing in most performance conversations. And finally, do an honest audit of your management debt. Is there someone on your team you've been keeping around because letting them go feels hard? Think about what that's costing you and the other high performers on your team. And if someone does need to be let go, take the steps to do so respectfully and humanely. And don't forget to tune in next week for part 2 of this conversation, where we'll be covering exactly that. How to give people a soft and humane landing when you need them to leave your organization.
And I asked a simple question. If it was you, what would you want? And whatever that answer is, it's like, okay, then we should offer that.
Thanks for joining me this week on The Lift. For more info on what you heard in today's episode, visit our show notes. You can find out more about the show at theliftpod.com. If listening to The Lift today was a good use of your time, please share it with a colleague, a friend, I don't know, your ex, your mother, anyone. Don't let good advice die with you. And for those of you who like to earn a little bit of extra credit, leave a comment on Spotify. We'd love to hear from you. The Lift is produced and edited by the team at Edit Audio. This episode was produced by Victoria Marin and edited by Ali Sirwa. Our production manager is Kathleen Speckert. Our executive producer is Steph Colburn. A special thanks to Corey Rich and Beth Gatzik.